Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for joining the side event. As we can see on the program, we'll be dealing with how to develop an evidence and gap map as a beginner. And so what actually we hope to achieve at the end of this presentation is if you knew nothing about what evidence and gap maps are, and you were asked, what are the steps in developing an evidence gap map? At least you can give the steps without even going into the technicalities. Yeah. My name is Sheila Ajiman Opon, and I'm a development economist. I am currently doing a postdoctoral fellow at the International Center for Evaluation and Development. Currently, working and helping developing evidence and gap maps and its associated evidence-based decision-making products like survey summaries and what have you. I'll be doing this with my colleague Clarice Penignan, who is a research associate and a programs officer at the International Center for Evaluation and Development. Yeah. So in terms of what I said about what we want to, the give takeaways we want to achieve at the end of this EGM presentation, we want to be able to go through what an evidence and gap map is and how it looks like and how to navigate through an evidence and gap maps. And then we would also look at how to develop research topics when developing these evidence and gap maps. We would also talk about how to define the PICOs. And when we get to the PICOs, we would know the full meaning of what we mean by PICOs. Then we will also go through how to develop the search strategy and then the screening tools, how to analyze and report EGMs, and then we would navigate through a recent EGM that we did with you and go in for some Q&A. Yeah. So before we even move on to what an evidence and gap map is, we realize that there are thousands and thousands of published articles that comes out, and of these we have impact evaluations as part of these papers and other forms of evaluations like process evaluations, summative, formative evaluations. As part of these published papers too, we have systematic reviews and other forms of reviews like literature review, that's narrative literature review, and scoping reviews. So we ask ourselves, where can we find these papers? So for instance, if the Ministry of Agriculture and Food and Agriculture wants to pass a policy to help maybe the deprived farmers or smallholder farmers, and they want to see the evidence that there is on in terms of agriculture, nutrition, health, where do they find this evidence? We find out that these papers are scattered in databases, in journal articles, and websites. And it makes it a bit challenging to evidence users to separate the wheat from the chaff and get the quality evidence that they need to help them in policy formulation. In addition, the reports that comes out are mostly too long technical languages, which most non-experts will find it very difficult to understand. Now, this issue has been highlighted by some studies, even by the World Bank, where they wanted to know how much or how many of their reports are being downloaded or used. They realized that about a third of their reports have never been downloaded, and about more than 80% of their reports have never been cited. So What does this imply? It is either we are losing the opportunity of getting that quality evidence from these articles that are scattered in the various places we can find them, or project founders are just given funds to duplicate some of this research because we don't even know what evidence exists on that particular topic. So with this background, um, what needs to be done? Oh, yes, that is when evidence and gap maps come to play. Now, the 3IE and the 3IE was the first to come up with the evidence and gap maps, and then Quambel collaboration also joined. The International Center for Evaluation and Development, ICE, is also involved in developing evidence and gap maps. So what is an evidence and gap map? When we talk about an evidence and gap map, from definition from Sarah and Howard, an evidence and gap map is a systematic visual presentation of all available relevant evidence for a particular sector, subsector, or research question. So we say it is systematic because the papers that are included in the map are not just chosen haphazardly. We go through a process, a search process and a screening process to get all these papers, so it is systematic. And it's visual because from looking at the evidence and gap map, you can see where the visually you can see where evidence is clustered and where there's no evidence. That's where the gaps are. So typically an evidence gap map is a matrix, and to get a matrix you have an intervention row, an intervention category, which are normally on the rows, and then you have the outcome category or domain, which normally appears on the column. So an example of an evidence and gap map that ICE has developed is shown here. At the end of the presentation, we are going to navigate you through this evidence and gap map. So this is just to show how it looks like. Okay. So one very important step to developing an evidence gap map is to come up or develop a research topic or a research question. So like any other study that we undertake, from your problem statement, you have your research questions, and then you try to answer that research questions. EGMs are likewise the studies that we do. So you need to get a topic that you really want to focus your EGM on. So the first step is to get a general idea about what you want to do. So for instance, the one that we have done, we had infrastructure as a general idea. And here we are interested in low and middle income countries. And then you come down to what is it about this general idea that you want to research on or you want evidence on. Then your outcomes come to play. So here you're looking at how infrastructure can impact on nutritious diet, women's economic empowerment, and gender equality. Then from this interest, you are going to develop a tentative question. And so our question for this would be, what are the impacts or what is the impact of infrastructure? And here we are talking about fiscal infrastructure, which when we get into the EGM, we will see the various categories that we put in. How they are going to affect or how the impacts on nutritious diet, women's economic empowerment, and gender equality in low and middle income countries, and evidence and gap map. Yeah. Yes. So after developing your question, you would want to go through the PICOs. And by PICOs, this is what we mean by PICOs. The P is your population. Now, this is going to serve as a guideline throughout your EGM, because it's based on this PCOS that you are going to do your search strategy. You are going to do your uh, data extraction form. So this PCOS is very important to developing an evidence gap map. The P is for population, and so here you're looking at what relevant population do you want to research on? So who? Are you interested in looking at women, girls, and then based on geographic locations, do you want to do only low and middle income countries, sub-Saharan Africa, so what have you? And then you come to the N. The N is for intervention. Now you have to identify your intervention. So in our case, the intervention was the fiscal infrastructure. And here you can be specific or broad. So it can just be transport, where you are going to have the various categories under, or you can just go specific, like roads. So how does roads, construction of roads affect your outcomes? Then you come to the comparison. Now, okay, so we have no comparison because we're relating this to EGM where we have no comparison. But other EGMs that have comparison, we are talking about either a comparison or your control group is active or passive. So if you are rolling out an intervention, your active group is those receiving the intervention, and then against the other group, which is the passive. Then we come to the O, which is the outcome. So your intervention, you're going to roll. You want to look at the outcomes that you are interested in. And in this case, I talked about nutritious diets, women's economic empowerment, and gender equality. Then you come to the study design. And here, are you interested in just RCTs and systematic reviews? Because we found out that WIE only includes ICTs and systematic reviews, but for other evidence and gap maps developed by like the International Center for Evaluation and Development, we include other study designs like the quasi-experimental, you have descriptive studies, all that, yeah. So Clarissa, continue with it.
All right, so let me make this a bit interactive. So Sheila has given us the first two guidelines in trying to develop an EGM. So can someone tell me what the first guideline is? If you want to develop an evidence and gap map, what's the first thing you consider? Anyone? That's good. And the second one is? Fine. All right. So we are going to continue from there. So we've developed, we have our research question. We have our PCOS. What do we do next? We want to include studies or scholarship in this map. So what do we do next? It means we have to search for these papers. So then we go to the next guideline, which is developing the search strategy. Okay, so by strategy, what do I mean? Strategy is, it means you have to plan on how to carry out your search. You know, we have different sources of searches. We could have the academic sources, we could have the grey literature sources. Sheila mentioned initially that World Bank reported that you have most of their reports not being downloaded by users. Why is this the case? So in developing our EGM, we realized that most of these reports developed by World Bank, IFPRI, all these IFPRI, International Water Management, they don't have published articles in academic sources. So what do you have to do? It means you have to go the extra mile to visit these websites or these organizations and actually download whatever report you need from them. So then it means that when you want to develop a search, there are two key things you have to look out for: the where and then the how. So the where will tell you which sources you are going to look at. Are you just concentrating on academic sources? Are you concentrating on just the grey literature sources? So if you also want to combine the two, then you want to look at looking for your papers in both academic and search, grey literature. And then the how. How do you do this? You have to come up with a search term. So I'll take you through simple steps on how to carry out a simple search. So I have here that so for academic databases, we have both published and unpublished data sources. So in our case, EGM was on trying to find out what the impact of infrastructure is on nutritious diet, women economic empowerment, and gender equality. So we only focused on 3 academic sources. So we had the CAP abstract, Web of Science, Scopus, or PubMed. So depending on where you find yourself, the sector you find yourself, you could be in health, you could be in agriculture, you could be in nutrition. So you know the databases where you could actually go to find the papers you are searching for. So like I mentioned, because of what we had specified to do, we only concentrated on CAB abstract, Web of Science, and Scopus PubMed. Then I went through to Gray Literature search. So this search could be, you could either limit yourself or try to stretch yourself. So what we did in our case, we went to World Bank, we went to IFPRI, we went to International Water Management. We had about 32 different sources of Gray Literature where we were trying to find out if they have any study, any reports where they actually focused on our questions. So the nutritious diets, you can find some studies on nutritious diets in IFPRI. Then you can look at women economic empowerment. IFPRI also has a number of reports, gender equality, World Bank, and some other sources. And then when we were done, there are sometimes you come by a very good article, or let's say a book, and you realize that it has cited very important sources you might be interested in. So then you go through the references at the end of the particular article, then you try to backward search. So in my references, I have a number of sources that I think are relevant. So I'll take the first. So let's say in a book by, there was this book we had from one of the key women economic empowerment authors in IFPRI. We used the book a lot. So we found out that there were so many sources we could refer to. So you go through the sources and then go and back search from what she has done and see, are there some papers you missed in your first search? Are there papers you missed in your second search? So this will kind of complement what you did initially. Then we did our work in a software called EpiReviewer. So we complemented our search using machine learning. Now they are saying AI is the way. So what we did was we had there's an inbuilt AI in EpiReviewer called OpenAlex. So it will just help you in trying to find out additional papers from your academic sources and from your Gray Literature sources. If there's any paper you missed at all, it will bring up all these papers for you. Then at the end of the day, you are going to screen and see if they were relevant or not. Yes, and then we should also note that some of these papers may be accessible, some may not be accessible. So if you come across a paper that is not accessible, what we did was we tried to contact these authors. Some of them don't make their papers accessible. So I think in our case, we contacted about 5 authors. Kusimbing had a paper. There's one, Jennifer. Yeah, so you go the extra mile to ask them, oh, I'm working on this particular paper. I want to develop an EGM. I came across a paper, I think a paper will be relevant in my EGM. What do I do? So you ask them if they have the chance or if they would like to share their paper with you, then they do that. Otherwise, you have to report, because if at the end of the day, I come back and I realize that, it's supposed to be systematic. I come back and I'm trying to reproduce what you have done. And I realize that there's this paper by Kusimbing. Why don't you have it in your map? Then you are going to report that, oh, I contacted Kusimbing on this paper. She was able to give it to me, or she was not able to give to me. All right, so then we go to the how. Like I mentioned, you are trying to develop your search strategy. We are done with the where. You know where you are going to look for your papers. Now, how do you go about it? So then you come up with your key search terms. And in developing search terms, there are some Boolean operators we all use. I'm sure most of us are familiar with these operators. We have the and, on the or the not. Because of time, we would have loved you to practice some of these search terms and see how much results or feedback you get from these search engines. So you could try and enter infrastructure and nutritious diets in Google Scholar or Google. you realize that it either gives you, let's say, it will give you, let's say, about 1 million searches. But you may also want to broaden your search. So then what do you use? You use the OR operator. So then you come back and say, oh, maybe I want to study malaria and then nutrition. I don't want you to restrict me to just malaria and nutrition. Any paper at all you can give me on malaria and nutrition, then I'm going to add the OR symbol. So your search term is going to be malaria or nutrition. So you don't restrict yourself. There are some also wildcards you can use in doing your search. You can get this information from they're accessible online. What kind of Boolean operators you can use to restrict your searches. So you can use the comma, the question mark, the asterisk, and the dollar sign based on what you are looking for. So if you want to be specific enough, then you go for the AND. If you want to be restrictive or you want to open up, then you go for the OR. All right, so now you have your equals, you develop your search strategy, you know how to go about it. Now, how do you have your papers now? Let's say you've conducted your search. What's the next thing you do? You're supposed to screen these papers. Yeah, very good. So that is where our screening tool comes in. So the screening tool is going to guide you on your inclusion and exclusion criteria. And this criteria is actually based on your PICOs. Yes. So in screening the studies, let's say you have a study by Kosimbing. For us, we were restricted by language. Like she mentioned, there was nobody on the team who could speak French. So we only restricted our studies on studies published in English. So then what's the next thing you look out for? You want a study that is, all right. So you want a study that is only published in English. What's the next thing you look out for? You want to look at the publication. Do you want studies that were published way beyond 2000, the year 2000? Do you want to include studies that were just from 2000 to 2023 or to your recent years? You know, it's based on what you are studying and what you are looking for. So that is going to be an exclusion or an inclusion criteria. So I have here that in screening for your studies, there are 2 steps. You screen at the title and abstract stage. If you think, oh, from looking at the title and the abstract, oh, I think this study has something I'm interested in, then it moves to the full test screening. By full test screening, I mean that you're actually going to read everything from the abstracts to the introduction, to the objectives, to the methods, and to the conclusion. After that, then you are going to code. So I'll show you a simple screening tool we developed in coming up with our infrastructure impact. Yes, I hope this is clear enough. Yeah. So this tool, you know, it's an inclusion or exclusion. At any point in time, if it says no, you don't continue to the next step. You exclude. So the first step here says that, so this paper you are actually screening at the title and abstract stage, is this study available in English? And I say yes. If I say yes, what's the next thing I'm looking at? Then it's asking, is my study conducted in low and middle income countries? So this is looking at what? The population. So like I said, the screening tool is based on the PICOs. Yeah. So if at this stage I say no, my study was not conducted in low and middle income countries, maybe my study was somewhere in America, it means that I'm going to exclude that paper. I don't need that paper in my EGM. Please, are we clear here? All right. Yes. Yes, very excellent. So like I mentioned, we were using a tool called Epi Reviewer. Yes, so for the title and abstract, we pair ourselves. So I could be doing the T&A with you. You would include a paper, I would exclude a paper. At the end of the day, we're supposed to come together and reconcile. So I'll ask you, why did you include this paper? Oh, then you point to me. I think this, if you look at the country, this is somewhere in Uganda. Then I say, oh, maybe I missed it. But in situations where we both don't agree, you are saying, no, I don't think this paper should be included. And I said, no, I think it should be included. Then we invite a third person. So in our team, we had a research director who was way above in methodological studies. So he will come in and tell you that, okay, he will look at the study and say, oh, I think this paper should be included or not. So this is done both at the title and abstract stage, and even at the full test stage, where you have to read the entire paper, which is more difficult than the T&A. Okay, so in our case, like I said, a third neutral person comes only if there's a disagreement. Yeah. So if during the reconciliation, it could be that I missed something. Maybe I missed the year, maybe in reading I missed the country, maybe I missed something and I included. Then you are going to point it to me that, oh, maybe you missed this thing. So we just reconcile from that stage. All right. So the next thing we look out for, then you ask, is the study? So like I mentioned, our study participants we were only focused on including participants who were low income consumers. So then you ask, so from reading the title and abstract, does it show any information on low income consumers? Let me add this caveat. You know, there are times when you read some abstracts, you don't get the full information. You don't get your population, you don't get your intervention, you don't get your comparison, you don't get your outcome in your abstract. It is best to include this paper for full text. You know, we all have our writing styles. In the sciences, they have their writing style. Someone in humanities have their writing style. So if you have a paper where the person doesn't specify the PICOs too well in the abstract, it means that you have to let this paper go through to the next stage where you have the full test screening. And at the full test screening, you are still going to go through the same screening tool. And like I mentioned, this screening tool is still based on our PICOs. Yeah. So the next question was on the intervention. So you've seen the title. I had a few examples. Because of time, you can't show it. Some of the titles are so good. You will see that the person has specified the intervention, the person has specified the population, the person has specified even the outcome. So in our title, like we mentioned, infrastructure's impacts on nutritious diets, women economic empowerment, and gender equality. From here, you can guess the intervention. So can anyone tell me what the intervention here is? On a study like infrastructure's impacts on nutritious diets, women economic empowerment, and gender equality. What's the intervention here? Infrastructure. So you see in my title, I already have my intervention in there. And then the outcome is what? Women empowerment. We're looking at 3 outcomes. So then I've even specified it for you. So does your outcome include women economic empowerment, gender equality, or nutritious diet? If you're not fortunate enough, some people have some, we came across some really interesting topics. Some were so interesting, you cannot even guess what the study is about. So in that case, you have to include the paper for your full test screening. Yeah, so we move on from the screening tool. So then we are done screening our papers. We have about, let's say, 200 papers to be included in our EGM. What do we do next? We have to code. By coding, unfortunately, we don't have the time to take you through our software, the software you used. So this coding tool will actually, it's kind of an incorporation of this, your screening tool. So by coding, it will ask you, you are just going to select. So when you open the paper, you just input. So what was your population? So under the population, if you're looking at low and middle income countries, you don't have to just put down the LMICs. Which country in LMIC were you looking at? So is it Uganda? Is it Ghana? Is it Tanzania? You have to code. So by coding, just take from the paper. Then you code on your interventions. What intervention did you look at? So in our case, infrastructure, we had 4 different categories of infrastructure. We had distribution, production, post-production, and then information infrastructure. So you're going to code for all of these papers. Like Sheila mentioned, the EGM, sorry about that. The EGM shows the intervention categories and the outcome categories. So when you are done coding and you want to pull up your map, this map is going to show you the kinds of interventions and outcomes you showed for which particular paper you are selecting. So she'll just quickly navigate you through what we did initially. When you are done with your map, what do? Where we have policymakers asking us, so what is the use of the EGM? Why do I need the EGM? EGM is just an evidence and a gap map. It will show you the cluster of evidence you have. So if you want evidence on malaria and nutrition, it will give you the evidence, all the evidence there is based on your specified inclusion and exclusion criteria. What evidence is available on malaria and nutrition, and what are the gaps? So it doesn't really go ahead to analyze some extra studies. It just shows you what the evidence are. So in the future, if there's a need for more studies to be done in a particular area, Then you go to the gaps. Oh, I think when you look at irrigation and women economic empowerment, there's no study there. Oh, I think we can take it up. Then that is where your gaps are useful. Where your synthesis are then say, oh, I think there's so much studies on infrastructure and nutritious diet. And where is it even located? Most of these studies are in Sub-Saharan Africa. Most of these studies are in South Asia. Yeah. So we quickly take you through a map. I can see most of you are looking at your time. So like I mentioned, you see, most of these great literature sources are not peer reviewed. Yes. We included everything. Yes. Yes. Because sometimes the World Bank produces evaluation reports. They have evaluation reports, process evaluation, formative evaluations, which are not peer reviewed, but they are very, very relevant. Yes. So we included everything. Yeah.
This type of analysis you're doing, it doesn't really matter. Like, do you look at quality of data, or do you do a quality assessment?
Okay. Yes. So this came up strongly. You know, initially we had decided to only assess quality for systematic reviews. But then we came back and then we realized that, you know, more people, like most of our stakeholders were asking, so what's the quality of the paper? So we actually went ahead, we came back later and then did quality. We used which tool? AMSTER. Yes, we used the AMSTER. We used AMSTER to assess the quality of papers included in the EGM. So you could decide to include, you know, the dicey thing about it. Someone might see this and say that, why are you ranking my paper low? I mean, why are you? It was a very, very big issue at the stakeholder engagement. And then we said, oh, there are tools, there are standardized tools to use to assess this paper. So we just went ahead to use the standardized tools. Yeah. We are trying to show the numbers. Please, any more question? EPI reviewer. EPI. Yes, it's by Campbell collaboration. EPI. EPPI. Yes. So you have to pay a little token to be able to access it. It's not free. Yeah. Okay. So we want to show the map quickly. So this is our map. Please, can you see? Can you see this? Yeah. So on our rows we have our interventions, and then on the columns we have the outcomes. So where you see the bubbles, you can see colored bubbles. These bubbles actually represent the papers. The bigger the bubble, it means the more studies there is in there. The smaller the bubble, the less studies there are. Where you don't see any bubble, it means that there was no study in that bubble. So if you could open the first one, where we have irrigation and water, you see, once you put your cursor there, it tells you, I think she's opened it already. So once you open, you click on that particular cell. This cell is going to come up with all the papers that are in that particular cell. So I think the outcome was food availability at the farm level, and then the infrastructure was irrigation. So at that time, we have about 162 papers in that particular cell. If you want to access the papers, you just click on the paper there. You have the URL to take you straight to where the paper is. Then you can read. Yeah. So Sheila, let's show them a different cell where there are no evidence, so they know what's what. So you can filter based on anything. You can filter based on your study design. You can filter based on your intervention, filter based on your outcomes. Yeah. So in our case, we filtered based on the types of evaluations. So if you click the bubble, you realize that you see a number of impact evaluation papers, process evaluation papers, formative and summative. Shida, let's close this. Yeah. And then let's go to where the gaps are. Click on any of the gaps. So you see, the EGM gives you a pictorial view of. So if a policymaker should just come to you and ask you, so where do you think I should focus my maybe I want to do something, I want to maybe work on irrigation and then nutritious diet. Policymaker can just ask you, so where do you think I should focus my attention to? Then you can pull up your EGM and tell them that, oh, I think when you look at maybe irrigation and food availability at the household level, you could get a number of studies. Then you can synthesize. So we went ahead to do a summary of these papers. So sometimes a policy maker will not have the time to read all these 162 papers in a cell. So what do? We summarized. So for each cell, you can have a summary of all the papers in there because they have some unique characteristics. You know, they have the same interventions, they have the same outcomes. So you take these papers one after the other and see what the similarities are in there and summarize them. So if I'm a policymaker, I can just come up to you. Oh, so what do you think about this particular cell? I'll just pull my summary for you and tell you that. Oh, so this cell talks about so and so and that. And if you want a breakdown of the papers, I can also give you the breakdown of these papers. We wanted you to actually go through the maps yourself, but because of time, we couldn't do that. Yeah. So this is a very simple way of developing an evidence and gap map. Like we said, it's a beginner's guide. So the first thing you do is you specify your research question. It's supposed to be as broad enough as possible because it's not a systematic review you are conducting. And then the next thing is to define your PQs. The PQs is very, very important in trying to know which papers to include or exclude in the map. After defining your PQs, then what do? You're supposed to search for these papers. Then you come up with your search strategy, where you look at where and then how to conduct your search. After coming up with your search, I have my papers now. What do I do? What do you do next? After having your papers, you screen. You screen at the title and abstract. If you've included in the paper for full test, you screen at the full test level too. So now you have your papers at the full test level. What do you do now? You code them on like I mentioned, we used EPI. 3IE has a different software they used, but we use the Campbell Collaborations software. So you screen your papers and then you just come up with your map. Unfortunately, because of time, we couldn't just take you through how we develop the map. So this is just a simple guide on developing the EGM. Any more questions, please? All right, I think we spent enough time here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We will share the link with you. We didn't take attendance. We'll share our link with. Otherwise, you could just visit our website, International Center for Evaluation and Development. Our map is posted on the website, so you can go there and then interact with it. Right. Thank you very much.